just on free trade, I just want to go back to that. So I guess the traditional argument for free trade is that it does result in lower costs, lower prices for consumers. So consumers are better off, lower input costs for industries, and that should. Yep. Okay. Look, I want to understand where you're coming from. What a, that should result in improved output, higher GDP is the argument, higher welfare for consumers. What are your arguments against free trade, please, Ian?
Okay. The package of ideas you just presented forms a complex known as the theory of comparative advantage. And it goes back about 200 years to David Ricardo, who was a British economist who kind of first worked this out. And I'll say straight up that a lot of these theories are in fact true, which is why neither I nor the organization whose advisory board I'm on, which is Coalition for Prosperous America, which you can find at prosperousamerica.org, none of us are in favor of abolishing trade. We're against free trade. We're not against trade. Nobody here favors oligarchy, which is what completely crazy countries like North Korea try to achieve.
Hmm.
But that theory of free trade is, I don't know if it's 75% true or what number you want to put on it, because there are huge gaps in the theory, huge holes in the theory, huge exceptions that are big enough that taken together, it's very expensive to ignore. For a start, you talked about low consumer prices. Low consumer prices are not the only good thing in an economy. You want low prices. You also want high wages. Okay. And if you look into this theory, the problem with it is it depends intellectually on a lot of unstated assumptions that range from dubious to obviously false. One assumption it assumes, and this is more aimed at the economists watching than most non economists, it assumes that there's no international capital mobility. It assumes that what are called factors of production don't migrate internationally. It assumes that there are no what are called externalities, that is, social costs like pollution or the social damage due to job loss. The other interesting thing is this theory doesn't even say, even if it is true, which it isn't, even if it were completely true, it doesn't say a lot of the things that people who cite it think it says. For example, a lot of people think that Ricardo proved that a rising tide lifts all boats, as they say, that free trade is good for everyone. No, even Ricardo didn't think it said that. A lot of people think that free trade is a long-term strategic answer for how to develop a country or keep it prosperous if it already is. Well, the theory doesn't even say that. The theory only tells you what the right thing to do right now. You know, if you have coconuts and the island next to you has oranges, you exchange coconuts and oranges and you end up better off. It doesn't say anything at all about economic growth. It doesn't say anything at all about long-term development trajectories of countries, but that's what really counts. One of my favorite quotes on the subject, which is in both of my books, and I can't remember where I saw it first, or I would claim originality, is that economic growth is about turning from Burkina Faso into South Korea. It is not about being the most efficient possible Burkina Faso forever. That cuts through a lot of sophistry in the economic discipline where people forget what a narrow concept efficiency is. I mean, efficiency is great. You don't want to be inefficient, but it's not the only thing that counts in economic life. It's not the only thing that's good for you.
Mm. Okay. Can you talk about, or this idea of the rising tide lifts all boats? What's the concern? What boats didn't get lifted with? I mean, I presume you're sort of talking about NAFTA, China entering into the WTO. What are the concerns that you've seen there? What boats weren't lifted, Ian? Is that part of your
Well,
argument? Yeah.
one of the assumption one of the assumptions that was made when the United States entered NAFTA, when the United States let China into the World Trade Organization and opened up its markets, was that sure, you're going to lose certain jobs because you're going to start importing things. But people lose their jobs all the time. People find new jobs all the time. It's going to be okay. If you have an economy that's growing overall, people just go from one job to another job. Now, it's now been studied in detail. The key paper on this is called The China Shock by a gentleman named David Autor at MIT. That's Autor, for those of you who want to look it up. And basically, what was discovered is that's not what happened to vast areas of the United States, secondary and tertiary urban centers, where jobs were destroyed. People's mobility from job to job is not frictionless. It's not frictionless for people to move where the new jobs are. People's entire lives, friends, family support systems are in one place. If they pick up and, try to move someplace else just to get a job, there's reasons why people don't do that. When you have the economy collapse in some Midwestern factory town, the real estate market collapses with it. So anybody who lives there wants to move someone else is trying to sell a house that is now worth very little. It is not worth enough money to buy a house in the place they'd have to move to, where there are jobs, where real estate prices are high because people have money. There are all these factors which, when you look in detail at what happened, you discover that the Ricardian free trade story, it's just full of holes. There are a number of things that are just wrong with it, even though at some level, yeah, it's an okay generalization about 75% of the time, maybe.